And we're back with Season 1, Episode 4 of Jujutsu Kaisen. This woman is crying because her son is trapped inside of a building with all of these cursed spirits, and Itadori is feeling pretty motivated to save all of the people trapped inside. He's very clearly still out of his depth in this profession, but at least he has a strong spirit. As the group gets ready to carry out the mission, I was surprised to see the teacher is actually capable of using some pretty high-level magic. He has this veil of darkness that can blanket the area and makes it so people outside can't see what's going on. There's also a pretty clear demonstration of how Megumi casts the spell to summon his dog, and during this scene when Itadori is petting the dog, I thought it was going to bite him for comedic effect. Sadly, it didn't happen. Now, you might be wondering why I'm watching this episode immediately after watching Season 1, Episode 23, but this is part of a series where I watch Jujutsu Kaisen completely out of order, and this is the order that people in the comments voted for, more or less, so here we go. Now, I've spent a lot of time very confused about some extremely basic information. You have no idea. I don't think I can even convey how nice it was to have this teacher character explaining things to me on the level that even an idiot would be able to understand. Hey, those are his words, not mine. I think he was calling Itadori an idiot, but maybe that makes me an idiot too. Anyway, from this explanation, I learned a lot of stuff about the different grades of cursed spirits, and even a good explanation for why characters always feel like they're so overwhelmed in this story. You see, there are actually only a few high-level sorcerers that deal with incidents, and they're often pretty busy. This is why in other episodes I tend to see groups of fodder-level characters running around and running away from powerful enemies, trying to keep them distracted until basically Todo shows up and saves the day. I'm pretty sure I used this exact line or very close in a previous script, so my powers of prediction were pretty on point back then. I guess I understood at least one aspect of this series fairly well. Now, getting back to the story, this show is very clearly using Itadori as an anchor for new viewers here, especially being one of the early episodes. They're showing him things for the first time or explaining things that he has already seen in more depth, in a way that feels natural to the story, because the main character doesn't know anything yet. But this also serves the purpose of teaching the audience about the story, the world, the system of magic, and so on. This is why it's extremely common to have fish out of water type main characters in any fantasy series. The technique of explaining things to a complete novice in the story, and then having that explanation also serve the audience, is pretty easy to pull off, and it's very convenient for an author to make use of. Now let's get on with the mission. The inside of the building looks nothing like how it's supposed to be. This two-story school, prison, hospital, or whatever it is, it's been transformed into a giant maze of metal pipes that expand all the way up for several stories, and I heard Megumi say something about domains again, which is a term that I'm starting to notice and remember more often. Well, his dog is really useful for this mission, and I get the sense that Megumi is the most experienced person in the group right now. The dog can sense danger, I think it can sense the people they're trying to save, it can help them find the way back out even if the door gets erased, and so on. There's so many things that it can do. Plus, I know this thing can fight, at least a little bit, so it's a very efficient summon to have around. This camera angle that the director used right here is often used to make the audience feel like characters are being watched from somewhere else, and here you can see Megumi being extremely cautious as he proceeds through the enemy lair. This combination of directing and visuals is meant to drive up the tension in the scene, and probably gives the anime a little bit more of a horror tone that, like I've mentioned before, doesn't really come across in later episodes, but I can see how this was used as a bit of a focus early on in the story. Eventually, the characters will become so strong that the monsters no longer feel scary, but for now, we can still have these scenes where characters are walking around in silence, and then they find a mangled body and a tone of despair and uncertainty comes across. Itadori recognizes the woman's son from earlier and wants to bring him back, but Megumi understands the gravity of their situation, and he's more worried about keeping the group safe. This is not a line of work where you can afford to make mistakes. Okay, well, scratch everything that I just said. Megumi and Itadori start fighting each other in the middle of this situation and completely ignore all of the danger around them, and any chance that a monster could be hiding 10 feet away from them. Megumi admits that he had no intention of saving this guy to begin with, and he actually brings up a philosophical idea that surprised me. Although, if I think about it, it does sound similar to the messaging that will appear later on in some of the episodes I've seen in Season 2, so this might actually be one of our first introductions to what could be a major theme of the story in Jujutsu Kaisen. If you save someone and that person goes on to cause more harm, have you actually done something good or something bad? Before we can get an answer, and I suspect this is a question that has no right answer, but it will continue to be addressed and explored for many episodes to come, Nobara gets fed up with these two guys and starts yelling at them to stop yelling at each other. Oh no, is she going to join in the fighting too? No, actually, it's even worse than that. While the group is fighting, the cursed spirit takes out the demon dog, eliminating their method of stealth detection. Then, using a stealth attack, he pulls Kugisaki into the ground, and then manages to get into close range with the two remaining sorcerers before they are even aware of what's going on. Now, this is a special grade cursed spirit, which should be way too powerful for our group to fight, and this leaves them stunned with fear. Itadori is the first one to draw his weapon and attack, but the enemy counters the attack by cutting off Yuji's hand. Kugisaki is just walking around in this dark area, so I guess she's probably okay. At least she doesn't need any sunscreen. But there are a lot of cursed spirits here, so maybe she's not okay. This episode is really showing me how ready Megumi is to run away, pretty much as soon as the situation gets bad. And he's also very willing to leave his comrades behind. This is a stark contrast to him wanting to stay behind and fight the enemy in Season 1, Episode 23, so that his comrades could escape, and how in that situation he refused to give up no matter how bad things seemed. So I can definitely see why these episodes were recommended as a pair. It's a good demonstration of his growth as a character. Also, funny enough, I'm watching his growth in reverse order, so it's almost like I'm getting to see him regress into a less mature state. Long story short, Itadori wants to see if Sukuna will help him so that they can both stay alive, but I was surprised to learn that apparently there's 18 other fragments of Sukuna out there. So man, my initial reading of the story was way off base. It really looks like Itadori is not that special just for having Sukuna's power inside of him. Beyond that, Sukuna just straight up admits that if Itadori gives him control, he's gonna kill Megumi, he's gonna kill Nobara, and then maybe he'll also kill the cursed spirit. But that might not even be the case. In a previous or later episode, I compared this guy to the Joker from DC Comics, and it really does feel here like he's just an agent of chaos. Him being so honest about his horrible and evil intentions is kind of funny though. Like, why wouldn't he just lie so that Itadori would give him control? That I do not know. The monster blows up this section of the floor, and I don't think he's trying to install new carpeting. So the plan is for Fushiguro, which is apparently Megumi's last name, that I might have heard before, but this was the first time that Itadori said it repeatedly. Anyway, Fushiguro is going to run off, find Nobara and rescue her, while Itadori stays here and keeps the special grade distracted. I almost don't want to say this next line, but I'm gonna say it anyway. So let's get a little bit of padding in between the last paragraph and the next one. The special grade cursed spirit immediately chooses to rip off his pants, and I'm not sure if it's me or Yuji who is more scared and confused watching this. Itadori gets blown up, he gets thrown through a wall, the enemy summons a barrier and smacks him with it, which I guess is like the equivalent of getting bashed with a shield. Now he's summoning lightning. Man, if there's one thing that Itadori is good at least he can take a beating. Plus, I'm pretty sure he's great at punching things, but maybe this enemy is just too strong to defeat with punches. By the way, it actually wasn't until around this time that I noticed the enemy in this episode is actually the same one as Season 1, Episode 23, so now I can really see how Megumi running away from this exact enemy in fear is directly related to him coming back at the end of the season, showing how much stronger, experienced, and brave he has gotten, and defeating the same enemy in a single combat. And yes, the reason I recognized him is because he used this same T-posing attack. Itadori is basically getting ripped apart just trying to hold back this offensive ability. He's only 4 episodes into the anime as the main character, and he's already seeing flashbacks of the previous arcs, while thinking about how he can't afford to allow himself to die here. This enemy must be pretty dangerous, I guess, if he's already provoking those flashbacks. Thinking about the futility of the situation, his own mortality, and his regrets, Itadori determines that he still has the will to fight on and survive. Mostly though, he just screams really loud, puts a lot of power into his fist, and tries to win by punching, and for the very first time, at least for me, watching this show out of order, the rage and punching strategy completely fails. The enemy catches his fist with the most casual, dismissive laugh that I've ever seen. But while this was happening, Megumi succeeded at getting Nobara out of the veil safely. As the demon dog howls, Itadori knows that he can finally let Sukuna take over his body, because nobody that he cares about is nearby and they won't be in any danger. I really feel like this is still going to have major consequences though. I mean, come on, this group couldn't even stop a special grade. How are they going to stop Sukuna? To me, this doesn't solve the problem at all, it just makes it worse. But let's see how it plays out. I really like how Sukuna's demeanor, voice, and way of thinking are all completely different from Itadori. It really drives home the idea that this isn't just a power inside of Yuji, but rather these are two very distinct personalities sharing the same body. They might look the same, but you can tell them apart at a glance. Now I'm seeing this situation is actually even worse than I thought, because Sukuna realizes that if he goes after the others, Itadori will just switch back to being in control of the body. So he comes up with a plan to lead the special grade back with him. If Itadori switches back, it will just be him and Megumi against the opponent that they can't defeat. However, as he heads off to do this, the cursed spirit makes a very stupid decision and tries to sneak attack Sukuna from behind, a classic Jujutsu Kaisen technique, which at this point almost feels like a catchphrase for this series. Maybe I should put it on t-shirts. Sukuna turns around and easily blocks the attack, then goes right on the offensive. Now the situation is reversed, and he's the one toying with the cursed spirit. He's so powerful that he accidentally heals Itadori without even meaning to do it. Outside, the teacher is going to take Nobara to the hospital, while Megumi stays behind to wait for Itadori or Sukuna. He requests them to send backup if possible, but apparently in a previous episode, probably episode 2 that I haven't seen yet, it seems Megumi asked Gojo to save Yuji's life, and this is why he feels like it will be his responsibility to stop Sukuna. Again, this appears to be a major theme of the story, and this episode is laying a lot of groundwork for future events. Having already seen those future events, it's actually a lot easier for me to visualize where things are going. Next, Sukuna uses his domain expansion, and I think I finally have a clear idea of what this technique actually is, or maybe what it does. Or at the very least, maybe I can understand 50% of it. Okay, so it looks like you can use this technique to transform your surroundings into some kind of terrain that favors or augments your own magical abilities. It's almost like reality warping in a way. So you can turn a juvenile detention center into a scary dungeon maze, you can turn a cave into a giant puddle, and I guess in Sukuna's case, he can summon a shrine that, for whatever reason, just cuts his opponent into pieces. And that's pretty much a wrap. Unless this enemy can keep regenerating from this, actually looking at this ending, I'm really confused at how this enemy could ever possibly come back. But I suppose it must have survived somehow because I see it again in a later episode. Now, I don't exactly get to see what happens next, but the episode ends with Sukuna figuring that Itadori is going to switch back, and he's a bit surprised, but also probably happy because that just doesn't happen. And that means he gets to keep control of the body for now. Something pretty terrible, interesting, or awesome is likely to happen in the next episode. But since I'm watching this out of order, I'm not going to see that right away, am I? During the end credits, I noticed something funny that I don't think I would have thought about before, since at the time I didn't really know most of these characters. You see, Fushiguro, who is definitely a bit of a stick in the mud, is the only character who doesn't really dance when he comes out. Meanwhile, let's compare this to Gojo. Despite being an older character, a mentor type character, he's a teacher, he's someone who's really strong, he still has this really laid back and silly vibe to him, and it matches his personality so well that unlike a serious character, unlike Megumi, he just busts out of the door with like full swagger and confidence, and he dances like he has no shame. Oh, and I also noticed this amazing Takatan reference in the ending theme. Wow. I have really sunk deep into this series when at this point I'm noticing small details like that. Well, anyway, let's wrap this up. With this episode, I got to see the classic trio together as pretty inexperienced rookies. A little bit of action, a creepy monster, I got to see a new side of Sukuna, and unraveled the mystery of what is going on in this story a little bit more, as well as finally laying the groundwork for what I think might be a major theme of this story. Every so often, I post polls on my community page, or I just ask for comments about which episodes to watch, so please check out my community page if you're interested in deciding on that, and subscribe to the channel if you're looking forward to more of these episodes. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day.